That's like the moment, right?
Maybe we have.
Thank you, Rano. Thank you, we need to. Speaking. Just recommence the session. Hearing of submissions on Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki. So the next submitters are Ngāti Tūrangi Tukua. Te mihi atu kia Ngāti Tūrangi Tukua, mihi kia koe tina.
Yeah, that's very good.
Tēnā koe.
So we're ready to begin. I'll let you begin your kōrero. There may be some questions I'll ask committee, but we'll have those at the end of your kōrero. Kia ora, Tina.
Kia ora koutou. Firstly, my apologies for not turning my camera on. For some reason, I'm upside down on my camera, and I feel that would be more distracting than me turning my camera off. So, aroha mai mō taku he. Tēnā koutou katoa, he mihi mahana kia koutou. Ko wai au, ko tina parau tōku ingoa no Ngāti Tūrangi Tukua ahau. He kai whakahaere ahau mo te rōpūtaia o te hapu. He mihi atu kia koutou. Kia ora everybody. My apologies also, this was not in my diary, so I am somewhat unprepared. But I guess just to give an overarching, I guess, kōrero about the Tūrangi Tukua submission, our key concern in the process was that we hadn't had an opportunity to engage as probably deeply with the Te Kotahitanga rōpū around the content of the plan as we would have preferred. To give further context to those in the hearings, and unfortunately I'm not 100% sure on the call, who was on the call, but just to give some context, Ngāti Tūrangi Tukua settled our treaty settlement as a hapu, as a result of the confiscation of the Tūrangi township by the Ministry of Works at the time, in the establishment of not only the Tūrangi township, but as part of the confiscation connected to the Tongariro Power development. So, you know, in 1998, when we settled with the Crown, we have a deed of settlement and legislation that appropriately connects to that deed of settlement that gives us the ability to engage directly with Waikato Regional Council, directly with Taupo District Council, and ultimately with the Crown. When the Tuwharetua collective settlement went through several years ago, there was a specific clause in the settlement that reaffirms the right of Ngāti Turangi Tukua to have its own direct engagement with Crown agencies, including councils. And I guess helpfully to give more context to that, letters were provided from the Crown, specifically from, at that time, Waikato, Environment Waikato and the Taupo District Council committing and to that understanding, as there were no statutory acknowledgements in the settlement at all. So this environmental plan, we have no concerns with how it refers to other hapu in Turangi Tukua, but for Ngāti Turangi Tukua ourselves, we have our own separate deed of settlement that overrides any other engagement on Aotearoa, which functionally and specifically is noted in our deed of settlement as the Turangi Township and its surroundings. So our key concern is that this plan tends to include us in a way that is inappropriate, as we have our own direct engagement with the council. And also, I guess, to give you a heads up that we have determined, just as we have with the Taupo District Council, that we will be initiating a mana whakahono ārohe agreement with Waikato Regional Council for our rohe, as we are able to do under the RMA. So again, nothing worried about the content as it applies to other hapu, and we are part of Te Kotahitanga in our treaty settlement, but we have been very clear that for taiao matters, we speak for ourselves and carve out a specific place for ourselves in that direct engagement with the Crown agents.
Are you still there, Tina?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Kia ora. You may continue.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think in terms of remedy of this, we would require a specific section in the plan that gives effect to our treaty settlement, gives effect to the clauses within the Te Kotahitanga settlement, and directs all engagement for taiao matters back to Ngāti Turangi Tukua. And we would have a specific section that explicitly outlined that within the Turangi Tukua rohe, we hold mana whenua, and all activities in the taiao space should be directed directly to us. Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you talk, and there's a bit of a delay, so I'm just going to hold in case there are any further tātai or comments.
So I just invite the committee if there are any comments. No comments. Right. Kia ora, Tina. Thank you for, I think, clarifying your concerns, and also for presenting your remedy. That's definitely be considered by
Sorry, I think I've lost you again.
okay.
I only hear people intermittently. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Tina, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, yes, thank you for that, for your concerns and also, the remedy, that you've explained. Is there anything else that you want to present to the committee?
I think just again reiterating the fact that we haven't actually been engaged directly on this kaupapa, other than receiving a draft and then being asked to submit. And I think for my hapu particularly, that's been quite challenging to not be involved directly in the design of the plan. Because I think potentially we would have had a different outcome. Being asked to submit on an iwi plan is not ideal for us. And so, you know, and that's something that we have to sort out in our own backyard. But I think, you know, our deep concerns has been that our own treaty settlement, which we fought very hard for, was not given recognition in the process for the plan. And I think what's also sad for us is that it wasn't caught by Environment Waikato, and we actually have a very old but a very real MOU that we signed as Ngāti Tirangi Tukua with Environment Waikato, which clearly hasn't lasted the test of time in terms of institutionalizing within the organisation, and so clearly was not included in the conversation. I think it's just making sure that you know, Ngāti Tirangi Tukua has a clear path carved for us, and we are firmly part of Ngāti Tukuretoa, and we're not trying to row our own boat, but we certainly are seeking direct, I guess, acknowledgement of our treaty settlement specifically. So again, just wanted to, I guess, reiterate the importance of our mana and our own rohe under our own commitment from the Crown, and how we can set about making sure that that's reflected in any documents that come out of Environment Waikato as a whole.
Nā koe cheers. Anga mihi kia koe tēnā. Oro he te whua tapu ki te whare toi tau kauri. Mai te teiteitanga o pihanga maunga i Ngāti Turangi Tukua. E kōrero tēnei e pāna ki te tikanga o te kotahitanga o Ngāti Tuwharetoa. So I'm providing a tikanga kōrero of te kotahitanga o Ngāti Tuwharetoa. One important tikanga of te kotahitanga o Ngāti Tuwharetoa is mana a hapu.
Yeah.
And a mechanism to ensure that the mana of the hapu is always upheld is that up until recently, from 2018 to Kotahitanga o Ngāti Tuwharetoa have held monthly hui, in which there are two representatives from each of the 26 hapu present at the hui. The purpose of having two representatives from each of the hapu, of the 26 hapu, is that they communicate back with their hapu. They've been put there by their hapu to be a conduit to transfer the information from the hapu to the kotahitanga table, and or from the kotahitanga table back to the hapu. On 14 occasions since 2018, Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki has been presented to the 26 hapu, included amongst that are the representatives from Ngāti Turangi Tukua. And this is an important factor because it's about tikanga. And it's about recognising the mana of the hapu. On each of those occasions, including a presentation from the Waikato Regional Council, a full presentation, and on 4 occasions, full presentations from the team, there was no dissent or comment that indicated any dissent from only Tupua representatives present at the meeting. We would have hoped that they would have brought some of the information from you requesting us to do a presentation at Hirangi, but that never eventuated. So every effort has been made through our mechanisms which uphold that tikanga of mana a hapu at the kotahitanga o Ngāti Tūwharetoa end. Engari, kei a koe tērā, the mana of the hapu is paramount, as is the mana of every hapu within Ngāti Tūwharetoa. Ko tēnei te mihi kia koe.
Oh, kia ora. I'm assuming that's you, Tengai, here. Sorry, I don't even know who's on the call. But he mihi atu kia koe te whanaunga. I think absolutely Auntie Hine and Hariata are our representatives on the Te Kotahitanga process. And as I said, we probably have to do some mahi in our own backyard to make sure that we are participating effectively in that process. But what I would say is that, you know, the clauses within the Te Kotahitanga settlement that Tūrangi Tupua fought really hard to include, that's what we're wanting to see reflected in the plan. And I totally understand that there is a process that Te Kotahitanga uses. But one of the key bits for us in making sure those clauses were in there were to ensure that if we weren't able to participate effectively in all of the processes, then that would enable a protection mechanism for our settlement. So I totally acknowledge your kōrero about the hui and our representatives. I think, though, it's just making sure that those are explicitly represented in the drafting, irrespective of the processes that clearly in this case didn't work in the manner that it should. And I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus for that. But I would say, just to follow up, that the remedy to put those clauses into the plan and to redirect any kaiao matters back to Ngāti Tūrangi Tupua is a good remedy to where we're at the moment, and enables, I guess, the next stage for our hapu to institute a mana whakahono ārohi agreement directly with the council. So definitely take your point about our representatives, but I guess I'm just keen to make sure that there's a clear solution that addresses the issues that were raised by our whānau in our marae hui.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you, Tīnaihe. Are there any further questions or matters for clarification from the committee? Oh, in that case, thank you again, Tina, for your presentation. I think it's been absolutely clear, and we will take on board the deliberations, your discussion today, and also the matters that were raised in the written submission from the charitable trust. And we will also, I think, respond to you on the request that was made for meeting with Te Kānapanapa. But let's consider the matters before us first. And I'm sure that the way that you presented the solution, the way forward, is something that we can consider. So, ngā mihi nui ki a koe, ngā mihi ki a Ngāti Turangi Tuku. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou. Thank you for the time.
So that ends our verbal submissions. We will now take the recommendations. I'll find them. So the recommendations are that the report draft Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki, sorry. Oh, sorry, Ali.
Oh, that's why. Just confirming for the joint committee that your previous resolution of accepting the first report and the late submission from Lakes and Waterways is the decision for that first part, the hearing of submission. So there's no further resolutions required for you at this point. From here, we'll enter into deliberations and there will be another decision point for you at the end of that particular part of the program. Yeah.
Right, so we move into deliberation.
Good,
How do you want
okay.
to handle it?
I'll take direction from the co-chairs in the committee, but just as a proposal, I thought it might be useful to just very quickly go through the process we've undertaken so far so that you have, so you're reminded of the comprehensive, I guess, engagement that and development undertaken with regard to the draft. And then we'll get into revising each submission point one by one, along with the amendments to address those submission points. Are you happy for me to take that approach, Co-Chair?
Yep.
Okay, in aroha mai, if it feels a bit repetitive because we have been through this information a number of times with you previously. Starting right back at the beginning of why, I guess, why we are here today.
Excuse me, Chief. Do we have this in a line like this, or can some of us go over there so we can look at each other and speak?
Yeah, now's a good time to rearrange yourself.
Just sitting in a line. You're available.
You're going to start with.
Oh, that's what.
Very good.
We only see me so much, you may not want to look at it.
Bye. Okay, so we'll get back into it and just refreshing our memories why we're here today. Well, back in 2018, Ngāti Tūwhare Toa received a full and final settlement with the Act being enacted. And essentially, the treaty settlement acknowledges that Ngāti Tūwhare Toa, in every generation since 1840, has been adversely affected by the fact that the Crown has not upheld its obligations under the treaty. Te Kotahitanga is the mandated iwi authority to receive that treaty settlement. And part of the treaty settlement actually requires us to form a joint committee, and that is you, Te Kaupapa Kānapanapa. A key focus for you is to develop Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki, which is a high-level catchment plan for taupo. ngā pau e toru e te kāpua whakapipi. So fundamental to Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki is ngā pau e toru, which is the framework that reflects the aspirations of Ngāti Tūwharetoa. And the three pau are tongariro te maunga, te matipuna o te wai, te ahi kāmo Tūwharetoa, te iwi Tūwharetoa, te hapu. It is the foundation statement for te takitanga. And the issues, objectives and outcomes within the document are organised under the three pau. The other element to Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki worth highlighting is Te Kapua Whakapipi, which describes the vision and desired outcomes of Te Ariki Tātumu Te Hiuhiu on all matters pertaining to the well-being of Tūwharetoa. And so these two things together provides the basis for Ngāti Tūwharetoa tikanga and how they determine their relationships with everything within the environment and people. And it's actually what makes this particular document unique.
Ali, would you mind laying your microphone just a little bit closer? Just straining to the ears a little.
Okay, and so moving then to early consultation, and this is particularly relevant to address some of the concerns raised by the last submitter. You'll recall that in early 2021, I think it was March, yes, sorry, no, actually in 2020, Te Kānapanapa approved a consultation document for early consultation. And so a first round of early engagement was undertaken and we connected with more than 50 key stakeholders and the general public. A list of those key stakeholders are within your agenda. If you have a look at page 28, it's worth taking a look at the long list of stakeholders that we reached out to through that process. Essentially, the list of stakeholders, we sent the discussion document along with an invitation to meet with the working group so that we could gather their whakaaro and reflect it in a draft. You'll see that, yeah, it's a very long list, and Tūrangi Tukua, which is the trust, Tūrangi Tukua Trust, so not the members within Te Tahitanga, but the trust itself, are at the top of the list. The top 12 listed, in fact, were categorised as tier 1 stakeholders when we put together an engagement plan. And essentially, I guess a greater focus was given to the top 12 stakeholders on the basis that of their interest in the area. And so you'll see that the three organisations individually are right at the top. So that's Taupo District Council, Waikato Regional Council and Te Tahitanga. Tūwharetoa Māori Trust Board, of course, is in there, along with the Office of the Ariki, Tūrangi Tukua, Ngāti Rangi, Ngāti Raukawa, DOC. It's Te Arawa River Iwi Trust is there, but that's as it relates to specifically Ngāti Tahu, Ngāti Te Pāua, who have an interest within the rohe, and then also Ngā Tangata Tiaki, which essentially is the iwi group at the southern end of the rohe that Kaupapa Kaitiaki is relevant to. This group, either we had a legislative requirement to engage with them because of the settlement legislation, or it was the right thing to do because of perhaps their own treaty settlement, and so Tūrangi Tukua is in that category. And so stakeholders and the general public were able to connect with us in a variety of ways. We made it as simple as possible and tried to provide as many options as possible also. And so we engaged via the website, a website that was set up specifically for Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki. We held virtual hui, so people could engage that way. We were willing to do kanohi ki te kanohi. So if you want to meet with us in a physical way, let us know and we will come and meet with you. And there were certainly some groups that preferred to engage with us in that way. And so through that early engagement process, we received 60 responses to the consultation document. And their feedback was extremely insightful, extremely valuable, and it certainly helped us to draft the plan that was publicly notified. Moving then to the public notification, which I sort of touched on at the beginning of the meeting before we heard the two submissions. And so back in June, just fairly recently, Te Kaupapa Kānapanapa approved the draft Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki for public notification. We had a 1 month process where the public could submit on the draft plan. 7 submissions were received, and of course today we're holding a hearing of submissions, deliberations, and the intention is by the end of the day to have a final version of the plan approved. At which time the plan will become operative. Just very quickly, this is the list of submissions that we received, 7 in total, and again, all of the submissions are included within your agenda. Through the public or through the submissions, this is a summary of the consultation that was, the feedback that was received. Overall, there is general support for Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki that came through really strongly, so that's extremely positive. Adjustments or clarifications have been sought relating to the objectives, outcomes, timeframes, and terms used, and also recognition of value. There was a request for further engagement, and that was specific to Tūrangi Tupua in their submission. We had one submitter that strongly opposed the plan, and only one submitter. And of course, you can see their submission within your agenda. I won't elaborate any further. Checking and, if needed, adjusting the plan in line with other key documents like Te Tiriti, national policy statements, and other acts like the Local Government Act. Strong interest in being involved in continued discussions. So beyond adoption of this plan, many groups want to be involved in the implementation and planning of that. And overall, the more integrated catchment management approach, as well as the holistic wellbeing outcome focused, is really valued by groups. So really positive. I'll take questions through the chair. Got a question over here.
Thanks, Molly. A really thorough process. I asked a question quite a while ago about how we were going to engage with Māori landowners that weren't linked into iwi or hapu, but nonetheless ahika or mana whenua who are on private land. How did we think of a way through that? Because that's the situation I'm in Kōpu. I'm not linked into iwi, but I consider myself ahika of that area. So how did we consider them as stakeholders, or how to get them? Or do we just lump them in with everyone else?
So if you have a look at page 28 of the agenda, that's basically the stakeholder contact list, and it does include Māori land trusts in there. I guess for everybody else, that public consultation process was considered the best mechanism, or not just the public consultation process, but actually engaging with the public through the early consultation process. So we put pānui in local newspapers, we put pānui on our websites, all of the organisations that are involved. We use social media, basically promoting the opportunity for anybody who wanted to engage with us through the development process to do so. And there were drop-in sessions around the Taupo district rohe as well, Tūrangi, Taupo, Kinloch, and a fourth. And I can't recall where the fourth location was off the top of my head, but certainly we did make a concerted effort to try and connect with landowners.
And did you get good information?
They were not all that well attended, the public drop-in sessions, yes. But in saying that, through the public consultation process, clearly we only received 7 submissions on the document. And one of the, I guess, conclusions you could draw from the fact that only 7 were received, and in fact they were generally really supportive and positive, is that the amount of early engagement and consultation that was undertaken really benefited us in the long run, because we spent so much time and effort engaging, doing a comprehensive early engagement process. It meant that, the number of submissions coming in on the plan are relatively low in number, and the feedback is generally positive. Yeah, a reflection of early engagement.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to pause at this stage because I want to bring up the next document that I'd like to share with you. And essentially the document is a list of all of the submission points that have been raised and the potential responses and amendments to those submissions, and where in the plan they can be found. Essentially what we're looking from. Yeah.
Just before you go,
yeah.
Could I remind the committee that in addition to those sessions, the virtual and Kanoe panel, we also had basically open door policy with Te Poare Mahi. So individuals from hapu, from other interests would come and talk about Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki, because we did drop off copies for interested parties for hapu, and there was a lot of interest. But the key thing is that we also had pasta hui, pasta hapu hui. So those covered Te Mātāpuna, all the hapu in the southern end, the Hauhanga, the Western Bays, Kaimanawa, and the Northern Taupo, the Hikuwai. So those were also advertised directly to the delegates and to some hapu. I'm not sure. I mean, once you click the button on those things, it just happens. But those were well advertised, as were the site, the website for Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki. And we had, as Te Ngahi said, we had huge support from the people who attended those hui. There was no dissent about anything in the document. And in fact, it was mostly very, very encouraging and constructive comment. And, they came from quarters of people who are quite negative to us. So that was quite a revelation. So, I mean, when you consider that, plus this document was born out of the settlement. It wasn't just created as a district plan or regional plan. It is the product of 30 years of thinking by Ngāti Te Whare Hapu and Ngāti Te Whare Collective. So that is what it was based on, and why it is underpinned by Ngā Pou e Toro, the worldview of Ngāti Te Whare. Each and every hapu has their input into that. And the way they understand their world is how they understand it as hapu, as kaitiaki. That is their world. As Tina said, Ngāti Turangi Tukua, the taiao is their world as kaitiaki of their taiao, as hapu, as mana whenua. So that is has always been the intention of this document. So it's not unusual for me to sit back and see all the fantastic responses that have been received, and the bulk of that from outside of Hapu. It's a reverse process from what I've seen through district plans, through regional plans. It was born different, sourced different. So now is the time for extra exposure to be put before the community, and that has happened. And we've got a fantastic response, thanks to our team and thanks to the decisions that were made around this time. So, kia ora. Sorry to interrupt you, Marty. I had to say it.
Yeah.
How far you're in charge today? Happy to take direction. And so just picking up where I left off, this document that is now up on the screen and shared with you is the important document that we want to work through with you. Essentially seeking your agreement to the proposed amendments or responses to submission points raised. Tūtahanga and Nick, please feel free to add any comments along the way. Both Tūtahanga and Nick contributed in a significant way to coming up with or developing appropriate responses and or amendments to submission points raised. So starting at the top, and this one does relate to the submission from Tūrangi Tukua, so it will be fresh in your mind, which is useful. In summary, their submission is, I guess, that they're seeking recognition for their mana that they hold as hapu within the Taupo here, well, particularly in the Tūrangi area, and also the reference to the MOU and mana whakapono arohi that they've entered into with the local government agencies within this area. Look, we had very similar feedback received through the early consultation process from other iwi that have interests within the taupo here, that they too wanted to maintain the mana that they hold. And so Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki is certainly recognises that there are other groups within the rohe that have their own mana, and so Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki does not replicate nor replace our obligations to those iwi groups or hapu. In fact, it's emphasised within the document. There are other references there to where submission points raised by Tūrangi Tukua are already addressed within the document, but there are also a number of additions that can be made to the document to further address the submission. So we're suggesting here in red that Tūrangi Tukua is named as an additional group or authority with overlapping interests within the other relevant matters section of the plan. At the moment, that part of the plan refers to Raukawa, Ngāti Rangi, Ngāti Tahu, Ngāti Whaoa. I don't know if I've missed anyone, but off the top of my head, it refers to those that group of iwi. So we're suggesting we add Ngāti Tūrangi Tukua there. We also suggest that there's an opportunity to add an objective, two objectives, one about the strengthening relationship between ngā hapu or Ngāti Tūwharetoa and the local authorities, and also a reference to giving effect to principles of te tiriti or waitangi in decision making. Just going back up to the top, I forgot to also highlight a minor suggested addition to the first paragraph there, adding the words and hapu, other iwi and hapu. So I'll pause there and just check whether there are any comments, questions, and agreement for suggested amendments.
Thanks to the chair. I think obviously very supportive, particularly with the self-evident development of implementation plan required by thoroughly responsible implementation activities. So I'm very supportive of the actual amendments as what outlined.
Thank you.
I gather through from Jane's position for Lakes and Willoway with the actual around the Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki will undertake a review over the 5 years and then after every 10 years. So it would include presented cultural impact as well.
Thank you for your comments. What I might do is just check in with the co-chairs about this part of, I guess, checking the amendments and getting your comments. One approach that we could take is just take the amendments as read and invite questions on all of them, or I can go through each of them one by one. Would you prefer take them as read and go through each one and just respond to comments?
I think it's probably more practical.
More expedient? Yeah. Okay, before we go ahead and do that though, can I just highlight a couple of changes that aren't in your agenda? As mentioned at the outset, Federated Farmers initially indicated a wish to be heard today but can't because they're not available, and so the working group I guess went through a process over the last week of checking whether the proposed amendments satisfied Federated Farmers, and to a large degree they do. They'll come back and confirm that, but have also asked for some minor additions for your consideration. They do improve, I guess, clarity, and they don't change the intent of the objectives or outcomes. So from a staff perspective, they are acceptable, but just want to highlight that to the committee and ask you to take a look because it is different from what was previously stipulated in your agenda. And so on your screen is some proposed additions from Federated Farmers. Essentially, what they were seeking in their submission is recognition of food production and flexibility for autonomy for farmers to, I guess, decide what land use works best for them in their situation. And so the additional objective proposed here is sustainable land use for food production, provides for people and communities economic and social well-being without compromising cultural and environmental objectives and outcomes. And the words that are highlighted in green are those that have been proposed by Fed farmers in addition to what's in your agenda. So as mentioned, it doesn't change the intent of the recommended objective. It does improve clarity. So we're recommending that we accept that particular amendment. But just would like to check that the committee itself is comfortable with the change.
So I'll come in first. I think those are sensible. As you say they meet the request, but they don't change the intent of the document or the outcomes. And when I look at them, I mean, there are other factors like te mana, te wai, and that regulate the sustainability, the viability, sustainability of those included. So I think we're on safe ground by accepting. Any comments from? Very good. Thank you, Marty.
Lovely, and there is one further suggestion from Federated Farmers to bring to your attention. The recommended outcome here relates to landowners having the ability to retain the use of their lands in ways that enhance the Indigenous ecosystems. So that was essentially how it was originally worded within your agenda. However, Fed Farmers have come back with a suggestion that we include maintain or enhance. So highlighted in green there.
But on the screen.
The next page.
Yeah, sorry, I think we've got a frozen screen here.
Oh, sorry.
I'll unshare and then share again and see if that fixes the problem. Yes, there we go, fixed it. Okay, so the key here is adding maintain or enhance. So those are the two words that are added in green for you to, I guess, be aware of and confirm whether or not you are comfortable that that addition is made in the final draft, in the final plan. And essentially it recognises that it's not acceptable to, I guess, go backwards from where we are, but it might be appropriate or necessary in some circumstances to maintain the status quo whilst finding areas in which enhancements can be made with regard to Indigenous biodiversity.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a sensible what they've done here, because it goes back to what I was saying before about Māori just aren't iwi or happy. You know, there's a lot of private Māori. We don't want to be caught up in a situation where it should be all landowners retain. And when someone picks up this document in 30 years' time after I'm long, how are they going to read it? And what are they going to want it to say? And I think we've got to be really, that's where we need to be really, really clear that, hey, we don't want these farms covered in trees and no communities, or we don't want this or we don't want that, but we need to be clear right now with it, rather than, you know what I mean? It's clear as it can be. And I think that for me, that sort of added to that said, if you want to hold the line, and that's what we're talking about before about the flood schemes, that's what we're advocating now for the flood schemes. Hold the line. It's unaffordable, you know. So and if you want to hold the line, that's fine, but you cannot go backwards. You have to go forward in any direction. So I think that's a common sense approach. I definitely support it.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Any more comments? April. Kia ora, April.
Kia ora tātou, he koe rangatira tēnā tātou katoa. Just the question that I have is, I hear what Stru's saying about maintain, but what if there's nothing there? You know, what if there are no Indigenous ecosystems remaining? What if there's nothing there? So you're holding a line of zero, you know? If we're, you know, if the purpose of the plan is to restore, you know, the health and well-being of the catchment, you know, and we're essentially saying, you know, you can maintain the Indigenous ecosystems if they're at zero, then how does that contribute to, you know, the overall objective of Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki? You know, because if you let people do nothing, they will do nothing. So, yeah. Pēnei taku pātai.
Thank you, April. Any more comments?
Yeah, oh, sorry, kia ora, April.
And then Kathy.
How would you, that's cool, but how would you write that then? That you're not gonna get someone in the future who's gonna grab that wording and say, right, you know, this actually means what those fellas meant 30, 40 years ago as they meant, or 30 years ago. Because we hark back to the Drainage Act of 1908. We still stand under that, you know, so this document could be around for a long time. So absolutely hope it is. It's a great document. But how do we future-proof that we're not going to get someone with aspirations, philosophies on what they think they should say, and you know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to get at? Just that we don't bankrupt everyone around the lake, you know, including Maori. So how do we word it that it future-proofs it? That's what I'm trying to say. Have you got any ideas?
Through the chair, obviously, I hear both sides of the discussion here, whether they should maintain or whether the implications of retain enhance or enhance is a better word than maintain. I don't know. There's a very subjective objective point of view, isn't it? Being up to people feel like, particularly even go down into the detail a bit more around ECNAs and things on, you know, the discussions around there, what, you know, who's the right to say what you can and can't do on land. With a lot of the ECNAs are on 50% on Maori owned land, for example. So it's a challenging discussion. So whether maintain is the bottom line, but retain means that this retain is not good enough anyway. It needs to be enhanced. So.
Yep. Thank you, John. Kathy.
Yeah, I think the important thing for me is to bear in mind that there are so many people in different situations. So I think what's important for me is that we try to provide something that actually looks that provides for every situation. So, for instance, there will be some people who have already done a lot of work on their property, have done a lot of planting, have spent a lot of money trying to actually enhance their property, and we don't want to put them in a situation where they are expected to do even more than they already have. So I think it's important that we consider the fact that as long as people don't degrade things further than they are, as long as we actually ask them to maintain or enhance, and that we actually encourage or incentivize people to enhance, but that if that's not affordable for them to do that, that at least they do not do anything to degrade it. So what we're saying is hold the line or do better. But I think we need to recognise the fact that some people have already done quite a lot. They may not be able to afford to do more at this stage, but there may be things that we can do that enable them to do that. So I think having maintain or enhance in there actually covers all options for people and doesn't make people as landowners feel like there are things they have to do or money they have to spend at the stage which they may not have at the moment.
Thank you, John.
Yes, just bring it to the actual purpose of the committee is the restore, protect and enhance. So there's a three fairly key words. So maintain. I guess you're right. There's so many different stakeholders and different situations where people either have some sort of control or destiny of what they do with their land, but it still has to be enhanced. That's the whole point of this document, isn't it? It's a high-level document, and there will be challenges going forward. The aspirations with coming to just agreeing with the principles of this document.
Still protected.
But, to maintain. It's the right word, or to.
Yeah, I think, you know, we're talking about totem section here. And if we look at the keywords for totem, treat with care, tend to foster, it's about guardianship. And the key word in Kaupapa Kaitiaki is guardianship, Kaitiaki tana. What does that mean? And United has explained this in every meeting we've been to recently with pest control, water quality management. So I'm going to let Te Mahi explain to you the golden rules of the Kaitiaki. And then you can think about what that wording should be. But I think if guardianship is up there, or Kaitiaki tana, which is the key word under this section, then we're probably okay. Because to me, Indigenous ecosystems, Indigenous biodiversity is only one sector of being a guardian. So, kia ora, Mahi.
Kia ora koutou. We all belong to different entities. And the council is the council, and it's here for a purpose. We all have one commonality, I believe. The kaupapa of Kaupapa Kaitiaki is Tonga-centric, meaning that of which we hold most precious is the focus of what we do to maintain its well-being. In that context, maintain makes sense. But I'll provide another context. As a council, each one of you represent the people that put you here, and some of you are currently on the hustings now. Is it your role as councillors, as advocates for the Taupo district, as representatives of the Taupo district, as people that have a significant role in the provision of services to everyone that lives within this district, the provision of facilities, and the provision of activities. Would you go on the hustings and say, I will maintain that? Or was the basis of what you would tell the voters is that we will continually strive to enhance them? Some of us are on different boards. I would ask each and every one that are on a different board, as you report back to the people that you represent, that we will maintain our position. When we tell them we will enhance. Enhance is not a frightening word. In the context of Kaitiaki tanga and Te Kōpu Kānapanapa, one wonderful thing, and I think it's been reflected in the responses from various entities, and I see one individual, is that it is Tonga centric. It transcends politics. It should. We're at a cusp globally of maybe a dramatic weather event time in our existence. Part of what makes Taupo special is the people that contribute to the management of this brand. It's a special brand. It's a brand that involves many of the taonga of Ngāti Tūwhare and I don't say that in an exclusive manner. We, through our fundamental beliefs and belief systems, for 34 generations of unbroken occupancy, carry an inherent responsibility to care for the environment that provides for us. That's not something that's exclusive to Ngāti Tūwhare. That's something that Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki opens its arms and makes this kaupapa a tātou thing, an us thing. That we do it together and that we make a difference. You can't make a difference by maintaining. You maintain. Maintain's not really a dynamic word. And yet this is a dynamic group of people. We wouldn't have this change. And I say wonderful changes if you weren't a dynamic council. Kaitiaki-tanga is something that's an inherent responsibility to us. But it's something that's focused solely on the well-being of that in which we hold most precious. So in that context, the water, the catchment, these are the things of life. And these are the things that we join with each other in a common purpose. And there are entrepreneurial outcomes to this. To have a brand that's our equivalent to a coal mark that resonates not only throughout Aotearoa, but internationally. If there's any time for this to happen, it is now. So I'd be here too long to explain what George wants me to. But here we are confronted with responses, and they're wonderful responses. But there's one thing to do with our tikanga where we have never erred. And it's the basis of one of the responses is that we have never, ever not engaged. We have never, ever not left our door open. And when I say we, I mean us. On the side of Te Kōpu o Kānapanapa and Te Paere Mahi, that door has always been open and the engagement has been robust. This is not a criticism of one of the submissions, but the lack of engagement is the foundation of one of the submissions. And I find that quite unfair. So in the context of the syntax behind me, or in front of me, I can't see that far. I'm at the stage where I can't see with them on or with them off. So I'm getting there. I'll leave that word maintain to you. But I'll just suggest that we are all better than that. And I agree with Stu. I think Te Kōpu Kānapanapa as a body will always ensure that the word enhance is never manipulated or influenced to do all the things that Stu rightly has identified. I believe in the word. Orea, tēnei te me.
Thank you. Mahi, any further discussion on that?
No, Stu, thank you. Yeah, I completely agree. Could we change, yeah, if you could build in Kaitiaki into that last statement. But my concerns are this, yeah. As a council, I've been in this council for 9 years now, and this committee is a beautiful committee. It's my favourite place to be in the entire 9 years. So but sadly the rest of the world, the stuff out there is not quite as beautiful as this. And we developed a document called Sea Change. It was exactly like this. Exactly this is how it started. Now it's become regulatory. We were promised that we'd never become regulatory, but now it's regulatory. The government have grabbed it and made it a regulation for that area. So that's the concern for me. Like Karakia collected, another example, bugger of this flood pump. We were going to do this flood pump and it was all good. Karakia collected, got that treaty land back, and it was in 5,000 cows. The government then said, no, you can't have muggages, so you have to, so they had to sell half of it. So it's not just one group of people missing out, it's the entire people missing out. So I just need that comfort that going forward into the future, our future generations, because I 100 million% believe in the intent of this committee. By 100 million%, there's nothing, no, I don't doubt that ever. It's what the people on the outside, the government, like to see change, grab, and then make it real true. And that's when these words count. That's what I'm trying to highlight with there. So maybe we could build in, instead of maintain, I agree, and I completely agree that maintain is a horrible, it's a horrible word, and it doesn't say what we want to achieve. But maybe you could sort of continue Kaitiaki, I don't know, Kaitiaki that land, or how you say that rather than, I don't know. Yeah.
I think, Stu, it's in there. If you turn to page 48 of Kaupapa Kaitiaki, I don't know what page it is in our custom documents, but in the summary, you go down to just below the middle, Kodema, and you see the bullet points opposite in the right-hand column. The first one is increased Indigenous biodiversity and recognition of the guardianship role landowners provide. And under that, it's got Maori landowners retain the ability to use their lands. which is the point in question. Now, if we look at guardianship, what is it? It's Tonga centric, but everything is a Tonga. It has an importance in our life. So guardianship is guided by tikanga, by kawa, by mātauranga, but it's really about three things. The health and well-being, we call it te oranga, or te tangata of people, te oranga or te taiao of the environment, and also the well-being of taonga tuku nehu, everything that exists in this world. So that's what we're all about. That's what this document means when it uses the word kaitiakitanga, or as we interchange, guardianship. But we keep reminding ourselves what those mean. So, you know, I agree with Steve, but I think it's already in there. And it's really about balancing, about ensuring that the transformation that Kanai is talking about, moving us to a different brand, a new brand, something that's transformative in the way that we manage our world, that we decide what happens in our world. We have a different standard. And that's what Kaupapa Kaitiaki is striving for us to do, asking us to do that. So I think the messages are there. To me, you know, I understand where Federated Farmers is coming from on this, but I think, you know, the simple change is landowners retain their ability to use their lands. That is te oranga or te tangata. The well-being and prosperity, because as Nai said, the carer looks after the taonga, and the taonga looks after the carer. Balance it. Breathe it in, smell the clouds.
Yeah. We then taking on board what Stuart and Kath said earlier, could we then replace maintain with guardianship? That lets the landowner and that may not even protects them from being at a later stage having to do, especially the ones that have done a lot of work in that space. Just their presence and looking after that and maintaining that is guardianship. But guardianship is also an active verb. It covers both.
And their role is coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, every mum and dad farmer in the Waikato, and I know it's on one day, considers their farm right, every one of them. Right, and we've planted our waterways and we've fenced off all our waterways. We all believe, yeah, there's some bad things out there, but 90% of mum and dad, I'm not talking about corporate, mum and dad farmers who truly want to make it better for the next generation. You know, so if we can encapsulate that without bringing more rules, you know, that some Botman in 20 years' time is going to think, oh, well, that's a rule we can read there, like a sea change, and completely change the rules. If we can encapsulate that with patriarchy and guardianship, that's what it is.
So we'll leave our tech team to manipulate. You aware of that?
Make a suggestion.
Sure. Eddie.
So thank you tonight here. I think you're right. The word maintain is kind of a clinical word that that perhaps goes for the lowest common denominator. I guess the difficulty is sometimes that you know that people have already done a lot of work and you know, perhaps they've already done a huge amount of work and so I was just thinking we need to bear those things in mind. But I think you're right, and maybe what we need to do, like in that alternative wording there, could we say something like landowners as kaitiaki retain their ability to use their lands in ways that, I mean, I like the other option that's there, which talks about restore, protect, or enhance, because that sort of provides for the various options. I'm not sure, I mean, what do other people think? I mean, but I think if we do actually put their landowners as kaitiaki retain their ability to use their lands in ways that protect or enhance the Indigenous ecosystems, that would actually be better for me, because the word protect, I think, is stronger than maintain. But it also says if you've already done a lot of work on your property, then it's okay to actually recognise that you've done a lot of work and now it's just a matter of protecting it rather than necessarily continuing to add to it. So for me, that covers those options. I don't know how other people feel, but if we put in there as kaitiaki, then it's actually saying we're recognising that landowners are kaitiaki, and then we kind of have a high aspiration for them to look after these things.
Thank you. April?
Kia ora tātou. He nui ngā kōrero. Thank you for the excellent discussion. I'm wondering if it could, I think that the provision's not aimed at people who have already done a lot. The provision is really aimed at people who have done nothing. So that's the way that I see it. So, you know, and you know, it's about, you know, leading to an outcome that's better than what we have now. So perhaps it's something like, and just noting that not all landowners are kaitiaki. There's a difference between being a kaitiaki and a guardian. So perhaps it's something like landowners retain their ability to use their lands in ways that are consistent with kaitiakitanga and guardianship, and are incentivised to restore, protect, or enhance the Indigenous ecosystems.
Perfect.
Yeah. So can we, are you looking for a decision on this?
Oh, I'm just seeking a repeat from April of the last part. I'm just typing out your words, and whilst the rest of you can't see it on the screen, the screen will catch up eventually. What I've got so far, April, is landowners retain their ability to use their lands in ways that are consistent with kaitiakitanga and guardianship. What was next?
And are incentivised to restore, protect, or enhance the Indigenous ecosystems, so that we get around Stu's concern about landowners being regulated, because I agree with Stu in that the way to go is to incentivise people rather than necessarily compelling them to do things.
Yeah, thank you, April. I think, you know, your suggestion is a very good suggestion, and it probably it actually reduces the 2 bullet points that are at the top of Tōrima. Tutahona's not looking at me. Because it combines the two intentions into a single. But I'm checking with Tutahona because I'm not sure combining them actually makes a different statement about.
Oh,
Maybe just retain both of them and accept the wording that April has given.
Yeah, it's been really interesting listening to the kōrero. I like the idea of going back to the purpose of Te Kaupapa Kānapanapa, which is to restore. What's the other word? Protect and enhance. So that sort of covers the 3 stages in my view. If you've got no Indigenous biodiversity, then you're at restore level. If you have some and it's enough, then you protect. If you've got some and there's not enough, then you enhance. The idea of guardianship, I think, is already contained in the other outcomes, the one before that. So reading this sentence in context, I think, adds a bit of additional understanding of where it sits. The idea of incentivizing, I think, is a good one, but I'm just wondering whether that's more of an objective rather than an outcome, because the outcome is to have more Indigenous biodiversity whilst keeping landowners retain their ability to use their land as they see fit. So the incentivizing is the process rather than the outcome that you're trying to seek.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, doesn't it? Good, Chairman.
Just to take everything on a different angle. There's 2 key words that have occurred to me after listening to everybody. And it's the first word is consciousness. And the second word is balance. And so I brought it back and I guess I'm picking up on your comments how this is a fantastic committee. I'll take it a bit further and give my own definition. We actually stand in the role of agents of social change. That's how I see us. And I believe that in promoting and adopting Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki, we're actually, in my opinion, in an organisation like a local authority, making a stand to increase the consciousness that is out there, that people will feel they've got permission to actually behave differently. And so it then is up to each individual to see the good in what's been reflected in Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki. And I think that is evident by the number of submissions that were received and the number that were actually in agreement with the way Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki directs everybody or shows everybody. So what comes out of that then is the maintenance, and I use the word maintenance in this respect, of the restoration. If you haven't got it served, then you need to do something about it. If you already have achieved it, as you said, then we can help you protect it. And then we can collectively, from that point, raise the bar, so to speak. And that's where I see this document not aging. It's going to be the next generation of councillors that come on that will accept this and hopefully buy into this. So my simplistic way of saying it, I agree with what's being discussed today, and that it helps, in my opinion, us to provide or facilitate an increased consciousness what we're trying to do, going back to our taiao, and know that the taiao will look after us, and it won't prohibit us from being entrepreneurial. If we have a few set of inherent rules, it will happen. This might all sound gobbledygook. I don't know if that's going to get recorded as a word, but what I am saying is that we are agents for social change, and this is a fantastic opportunity without, I don't believe, penalising any part of our society. Sure.
Yeah, I think, that's very commentary, Larry. You think of with the balance, obviously, you extend that to things like the education, communication with communities, and as you mentioned, obviously, for example, 90% of farmers are responsible in looking at enhancing their properties when they get to 10%. So we maintain, probably let's out that 10%. Technically, I mean, it's not legislatively, but I like those words, consciousness and balance as well, because everyone's got different perspective of how they should be using or dealing with their land. But I'm getting back to my comment before, as George mentioned, the purpose of the committee is restore, protect and enhance. So to me, more is less, in some respects.
Okay, thank you for very robust discussion and very constructive, I think. So are we about to
Learn something? Well, let me see if I can be helpful to land an option. Just listening to the kōrero from the committee, there are a number of things that I hear you've agreed to, and that is maintain is not the appropriate word to be used in this context. However, you would all be comfortable using restore, protect and enhance or enhance. In this context, one, it reflects the purpose of this committee, and two, it recognises, as Tūtahanga explained, that then if you're starting from zero, you might need to restore. If you've done some work, then you'd be expected to protect that work, and in some circumstance, enhance. So the variety of, I guess, options available in terms of landowners and Indigenous ecosystems on their property. Also, just the further comment that has been made by Tūtahanga with regard to incentivising, and the fact that that essentially results in a objective rather than an outcome, suggests to me that it's potentially not the right words to be used in this context either. And so just testing with the committee whether the alternative coloured in purple meets everybody's, I guess, intention. And that is that landowners retain the ability to use their lands in ways that restore, protect or enhance the Indigenous ecosystems. It's relatively simple, but when you read it in context with the other outcomes within the document that already refer to guardianship and kaitiakitanga, it probably is best to keep it simple. Otherwise, we're going to have to look at combining or getting rid of some of the other outcomes that are already in the document. So I'll test that with the group. I've got a thumbs up on mine from April. I'll test it with others. If you feel comfortable with that, then I suggest we go with that. Alternatively, if you want to mull it over the lunch break, we could do that. Put our heads around together and see if we can, I guess, come up with an alternative. If this doesn't sit comfortably with you, then we'll come back after lunch.
So just a comment. I take on board the point that Tūtahanga made about the incentivisation doesn't probably fit in the outcome. But if we take that out of that statement, and I can't recall the rest of the document, I think the incentivisation of Indigenous ecosystems should be in there somewhere. We should lose it.
Shall we add an objective to that effect?
Please.
I guess just a slight note of caution from me in that the legislation is really clear that Kaupapa Kaitiaki is not meant to contain rules. It's not meant to talk about how we're going to achieve things in particular. What it's supposed to do is really focus on what the outcomes are. If I think about the sort of outcomes that we've identified in this part of the document, talking about the increase in Indigenous biodiversity, thank you. If I think about the outcomes in this part of the document, which talk about increasing Indigenous biodiversity, retaining the ability of landowners to utilise their land in different ways to generate value, not only for themselves, but for the broader community as well. There will be a myriad of ways that those can be achieved at a district council level, at a regional council level, at a level which is implemented by other groups within the community as well, which might not even have a statutory standing. Some of those will be incentives, some of them will be regulation. We've got a national policy statement on Indigenous biodiversity that we have to abide by. I think there's a danger if you start to get into specifying exactly which methods you expect future people implementing this document to be utilising, because it then starts to beg the question, if you're going to talk about and specify specific methods for this part of the document and these specific outcomes, what are we going to signal for other outcomes? So that's just, I guess, a note of caution around that term incentivising.
Thank you for that, Nick. I think that makes that clear. I think that makes it clear. I'm not absolutely certain. Yep. You know, I think what April has suggested is a really important point, and it's really contextualised by what's happening on Māori land and the opposition against the SNAs, and the fact that the exposure draft of the National Policy Statement on Indigenous Biodiversity attempted to provide some incentives, but they are failures, according to the Māori landowners. And I agree with them. You know, they're just stuff they're plucked out of their ears, doesn't mean much to the owners. So, you know, we're at loggerheads, but I think incentivising provides a key that people can constructively use in that space. So think about it.
Yeah. I always say with the whakaro with the kaupapa o te mātauranga Māori, ka tae tātou ko te pūtake, ko te whakawhanaungatanga o ngā mea katoa. So the basis of the Māori worldview, or how we see things, was the interconnectedness of everything. And sometimes Western views, it's kind of a little bit based on reductionism. So we look at things in separation. I think we've kind of done that here. Because you brought up something earlier, Chair, about in the context of the whole tauranga section, all these parts are protected, but you know, the next part is Indigenous biodiversity increases the guardianship status of landlord owners hold over Indigenous biodiversity is recognised Māori landowners retain their ability to use their lands and reduction on pest plants, etc., etc. And when you look at it in the context of that, we've kind of got stuck on a few words prior to that. In the context of the whole section, everything we've all discussed is all there. Yeah.
Again, I'll go back to this one. You know, landowners retaining the ability to use their land should only be governed by the rules of good guardianship. That is what this kaupapa is about. I think, you know, putting the handle on that they restore, protect or enhance the indigenous ecosystems, to me doesn't fit there. It fits somewhere else. Because as good guardians, as good kaitiaki, as they were spelt out, they are asked to do these things. And the system will judge them on how well they've balanced those things. The beef that Māori landowners have is that they are forced to do these things at considerable cost to them and liability to the owners. They haven't been consulted. Somebody said this is the policy, this is the law, and it's been imposed on them. That's why they are reacting the way they are. They're saying no. With the district council, to the regional council, to the government. So what's the solution? Be a good kaitiaki. Let them demonstrate what they can do. And this goes back. Māori landowners. Once they were hapu, the land was under a hapu management system. Exercised, or kaitiaki tanga was exercised over there. But, you know, I think, to me, it makes sense just to leave that out, have reference to kaitiaki. As Steve said right at the start. We don't have to put the other appendage on. Protect or enhance the indigenous ecosystem. Because that's already in there. It's in total. And it's expected. But don't force the expectation through another avenue. Because you'll only get resistance. Kaitiaki is not about creating resistance. So I'll leave that with you. Any further comments?
Yeah, I'm just on the right track, but just on their just on a bit with their they would like to see recognition TCP that while we support indigenous diversity, all landowners need to retain the ability to use land. So I would assume they obviously got their own agenda, but they're saying all. I would be considered as all landowners right through the catchment, doing Māori land. So whether this, I mean, obviously I think the point of this is not a legislative document, it's an aspirational one, but whether it's fair or unfair to exclude, I would have thought steer for landowners to retain the ability to use the land. It's just the wording here, the language we're going to use on that you're suggesting was,
Yeah, John, I think we're all clear that the change is all landowners.
Yeah.
April? Sorry.
Oh,
Yes.
thank you for the kōrero. I'm happy to leave with Marley and Tūtahanga and Nick to come up with some revised wording that reflects the conversation. I just want to say that I would advocate hard to retain that wording that's restore, protect and enhance, simply because if you ask my uncles on Hauhongaro 2C, what does it mean to retain the ability to use the lands in ways that are consistent with being kaitiaki? They'd say, oh, let's plant it all in pine trees. So, you know, and that wouldn't be, you know, I wouldn't agree with, you know, that's not consistent with the way that I think about kaitiaki. So, yeah, I think, I think let's not leave ourselves open to interpretation. I would have those words in there to be really clear about, you know, this is the outcome that we want.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
through the chair, I was one that obviously let's keep getting back to the purpose of the document as well. But it's clearly in the actual left and the actual so my opinion.
Okay, well, I think, is there a consensus if we leave this to our team?
Yeah,
Yes, I'm happy.
Okay, and we'll do for lunch. Thank you, everybody. Can we have lunch in 20 minutes or up to the very most?
Yeah. So many.
Because you look at one, I've got 15 countries, but I want to put it in place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but you can't. But if we create a situation where it's healthy people
you doing?
Sorry.
Okay, so let's get this done. To explain to us what the slide says.
Okay, there's probably far more words there than you expected to see. However, we thought it would be really useful to go back to what is in the document and identify for you all of the outcomes so that you can see them together, because where we were getting to prior to the lunch break is trying to incorporate words like guardianship within an outcome where, as you can see from all of the other, I guess all of the outcomes together, that aspect is already covered off elsewhere in an outcome. So starting with the words in purple. So the words in purple are what are originally in the draft Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki. Now turning to the submission from Federated Farmers. If you look at what the submission point is actually saying, it is requesting that all landowners retain their ability to use their lands. That was the simple request from Fed Farmers, and that is it. And so by simply removing the word Māori so that this particular outcome relates or affects all landowners, or recognises all landowners rather than just Māori landowners, you will, I guess, achieve the purpose of the submission point raised by Federated Farmers. Lastly, there was just, sorry, actually, before I move on to the next point, the addition of the words to enhance, or in ways that enhance, were actually words that were added, I guess, after the draft went out. And so it would be appropriate just not to include those words, because I think that's where we're all getting ourselves a bit tied up. However, there was a good point made by you about the purpose of this committee, and that is restoration, protection, enhancement. And so if you wanted to see those words reflected somewhere in this part of the in an outcome, then we suggest it probably fits best with the first outcome related to Indigenous biodiversity. And so, we just want you to think through whether or not you want those additional words in the first bullet point or not. Nick, Tūtahanga, do you want to add anything?
I would just like to add that I think the concept of guardianship is already covered in one of the outcomes, and there may be some risks around using the word kaitiaki for all landowners and the ramifications of that through how the Resource Management Act works. There might be some implications that would be unintentional. The idea that all landowners are kaitiaki for example, and a debate on who has kaitiaki tanga in a certain area. And I figure it's a lot easier to avoid that by just not putting that term in there.
Thank you for that. I think that's wise wise advice from our team. Any comments, please? You?
Just going on what you were saying there about an outcome, isn't that what the word restoration is? That's an outcome.
Yes,
But why is it?
because these are outcomes that we're looking to achieve. What we wanted to avoid.
That's a how. That's a how. That's how you're going to do it. That's telling you how to do it.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I guess it's okay in this context in that we've said there are 3 ways in which we'll increase biodiversity through restoration, protection and enhancement. So we've covered the whole suite.
Okay.
The point I was trying to make earlier was that if you start to pick off individual methods and say, we're going to use this method.
No, I'm happy with that. Yeah.
Whereas here you've said, we'll use every possible method.
There's no further comments. It's all okay.
I have a very quick one.
Yep.
Do we need to say both a reduction in pest plants and animals and reduced impact of pest plants and animals? Could we just have that the outcome we want is reduced impact of pest plants and animals? Do we have to have both?
Yeah, it's sort of hand in hand, aren't they? Same thing.
So then the outcome
There's
is
some not reduced.
that we want reduced.
They say different things to.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chair, sorry, with the on this page 71, isn't it? Yeah, Council, page 71.
Yes.
Starts off with this. Is this going to be either or? I mean, obviously, we've got Māori landowners retain the ability to use their land. That's specifically singled out. I don't have a problem with it, but obviously, we're just saying all landowners now.
Yeah. So we'll remove the term Māori at the start of that sentence.
Okay. Looks like we're in agreement with the changes. So I think that's all covered under our recommended for the staff recommendation at the end. So that's a good point to be. What else do we have in the deliberation?
I assume through you, the co-chair, that there are no other matters within the submission points that the committee want to dive into, and that you're happy with the remaining amendments. And if
I'll
that
just take a check on that. So are we happy with the changes that have been made?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, so yes, we have a agreement around that.
Thank you.
Oh,
Hopefully, good April.
Kia ora. I just had one point to raise in regards to the kids greening taupo submission. It was just a thought really about the outcome. They made an interesting point there about Indigenous worldviews and whakaaro informing or being a foundation for environmental education. And I wondered if under the kia mōhio outcome, if there could be an outcome like improved connection to te taiao through education, training and employment that is consistent with Ngāti Tūwhare tō tikanga. Yeah, and it came to me too when we had that face-to-face submission. from that wonderful woman, I can't remember her name now, but who was also from environmental. She was facilitating the environmental kura, and she also talked about connection. And I was thinking about our kaupapa and if it's to restore, protect and enhance environmental, cultural and spiritual well-being in the Taupo catchment, then connection is an essential part of that. And you know, and so the rangatahi and also adult learners through training, employment and also the schools. So yeah, that was just a thought.
Thank you, April. It's a very good suggestion. Any comments, supporters on that?
The chair would absolutely support that because having I thought it would have kids been talking, they're really, really engaging curriculums. So I would definitely support that.
Good point. All right, so we all support that?
Yeah.
Very good. Any additional matters for deliberations? Okay, in that case, I think we go to the recommendations. So those are recommendations on page 26, Murray?
Yes, indeed, and I'll just put up the recommendations on the screen because just a couple of additions for you to be aware of. In red, we've just made it clear about the amendments to the draft that are being made. So we've referred to table 2, the red text, but also the fact that you've modified the text in this deliberation, so making that very clear. We will attach the table with those modifications to the minutes, so we're all very clear about what changes need to be made to the draft Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki. You'll see we're also seeking a delegation to Director Neville Williams to approve minor editorial amendments, and that the amended draft be adopted as the final version, which will come into force by the 4th of November.
All right, so just reading those out again. First, that the report be received with the amendments marked up in red text in table 2. Modified deliberations and subsequently attached to the minutes are incorporated into the draft Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki. The Waikato Regional Council Director, Customer Community and Services, Neville Williams, has delegated authorization to approve minor editorial amendments that may be required, that the amended draft Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki is adopted as the final version of Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki and comes into force by 4 November. So all those in favour? Aye. Anybody against? Can we have a mover and a second?
Yes,
We only move, second that?
Councillor.
You? All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Congratulations.
It's some work.
And thank you to our wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I really like the way you guys. Something I've said to the house as well.
Oh, I think it came from this.
Sure, I got it from you. Someone. Because I did notice that this community was weird. And how we've changed that.
Yeah.
So I'll just check with our
There'll be a few.
the end of our agenda.
It is.
So we'll just do a closing Karakia and I'll ask Riadi to do it.
in normal fashion, I'm not going to do a karakia, but I am going to quote the words of Ngāhe when we normally read it. In his, normally his open karakia, he asks that we all come together to contribute to the kaupapa of the day, and that we do it with enthusiasm and we do it with respect of one another. That being the case, I think we've achieved that part, but also on his closing, he says, and when we leave even closer than what we were before we came into the room. So with those few words, I simply leave that there for us to pick up and take with us and travel safely. Home, doesn't matter whether it's only a kilometre or not, we can still have an accident. Yeah. Just be careful. Kia ora.
Yeah, thank you, Leonie, and I think also just reminding myself that this is probably the last meeting that we will have as an intact committee, because places change for Te Kaupapa Kānapanapa. So all those returning, thank you. All those who are leaving to greener pastures, go in peace, and thank you very much, everybody, for your support around this table, to the committee, to the work, and also for supporting our team. And to our team, thank you very much for the huge contribution that you've made to get this document approved today. So, you know, it's just fantastic. And yeah, I wish all those who still remain in the political arena with ambitions, all the best. And I filled in my voting book. So we'll see you all next time.
Malik, what do you think of the market trust in this?
Do you care? Do you care?
But I'm still rotating now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're still a trustee
Yes.
until you retire, or resign, or get replaced?